Welcome back to a late night edition of the Striped Sweater Podcast. I'm one half of your co-hosts, Hans, Zach Main, and I'm here with...
I'm Alexander Beersley, folks, and you know what? The dirt therapy seems to be working just fine.
I'll say it's a special late night edition. This is the latest we've ever done it. It is
generally
1:07 a.m.
Generally, we record like midday or like even like early, like 10 a.m. type time.
Yeah, so if it's like a little loopy, that's why.
I mean, I actually like slept really late this morning for whatever reason. I never do that, but I've been doing it more and more lately. But yeah, so like I was like, yeah, let's just do it tonight, like because I'm probably gonna be awake late anyway. So
I did not. I didn't get a lot of sleep, but I was up early and then I went.
But you don't have
golfing.
You don't have anything to do tomorrow, though, right?
Mother's Day.
I mean,
I'm gonna be in my mom's
not right
noon,
away.
so,
yeah, right. You got some time.
But I just got back from my match with tag teaming with Cowboy Bob Orton Jr.
Yep.
Randy Orton's dad.
That's very cool, right? The father of Randy Orton.
And Hall of Famer himself.
And he's been in the ring with Randy Orton, so by proxy, you know.
Well, I mean, I was also in the ring with Hornswoggle, so I've been in...
with a lot of people.
Yeah, I kind of share that.
You have the Eskimo, like ring Eskimo brothers with a lot of... I mean, I'm sure
and
I do, too.
And us with Brawler, too.
Sure.
I think adds a lot.
Yokozuna.
Owen Hart's first match
is in the WWF. Is that?
Yeah, I believe that's what it was.
Yeah.
Owen Hart was always one of my favorites.
Sure, Owen Hart was great. Definitely. He recently, it would have been his like 50-something birthday. I don't know if you saw any. People were posting about it on social media. It's cool that people do that, you know.
Yeah. So this is weird because this is actually a surprise question. So. You can leave it in or not.
Okay.
Well, not a question, but a statement. Did you see what happened today in wrestling?
No, I don't think so.
Silver King.
Okay.
You know who that is?
Yeah, Luchador.
Yeah, he died in the ring.
No shit.
Today.
No way.
Yeah.
Damn.
Getting pinned.
No shit.
Mm-hmm. He had a heart attack. Massive heart attack in the ring. Age 51, I think.
Yeah, he wouldn't be too old.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little old, but I was just in a match with a 69-year-old man, and 51, he did an RKO.
51. We're at the point in time, like, I mean, this is one thing that is kind of cool about our times, I guess. I'm generally pretty cynical and, like, I hate a lot of things about modern times, but one thing that's very cool is that 51 is considered early to die of a heart attack at this point.
20, even as wrestlers now.
20. I'm just saying, 20 years ago, 51. That was like not crazy to die in your 50s. You know, like now it's like that's basically considered young to die.
Yeah.
Of like a natural cause like that, which really, I mean, it is a natural cause, but in essence, it's not because I'm sure. I mean, heart attacks are almost always brought on by something.
Yeah,
usually diet related, but
also, you know, he's kind of older from a time when people were on the juice a lot and
doing a lot of drugs in general.
Yeah,
outside of steroids, but steroids and other things as well. But I'm not saying that he did those. I don't know that much about Silver King. But I do know Silver King from WCW. That's where I know him from. And I know he was in the cruiserweights, I believe. I've seen a few matches of his, but other than that, I'm not aware. But no, dude, I did not hear about that. That's pretty insane, and that's sad to hear.
Everyone was talking about it at the show.
Anytime someone dies in the ring, it's pretty...
It's not common. The last time I remember is when Rey Mysterio had that incident in Mexico.
Well, Rey Mysterio didn't die.
Well, yeah, I know.
Before you freak someone out.
No, yeah, this was years ago. He did it. He went to give a guy a 619, but when he ate the middle rope from the drop kick to set up for it, the rope was so loose, and the whiplash of it like broke his neck and killed him instantly.
It was some weird. It was just a freak accident.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was Pero Agoyo, Jr.
Yeah.
Hijo del Pero Agoyo or something like that.
Yeah. Cowboy Bob Orton, he said he was telling us, like, you know, he still gets up every day. He walks the dogs for a while, does like a good amount on the bike. He says he picks one body part a day to work out. You know, he like spends a lot of time working out and keeping fit.
Yeah.
And he's 69. He was solid. He pulled out an RKO.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool that he did an RKO. Very cool. So
Yeah.
I'll do my thing, and I will ask Mr. Zachariah Jamblaya. Are you ready?
And I'm going to say, hi, Hallex. And we're back.
This episode was called Sleepy Time.
It still is.
It was,
Actually.
and it is.
Then, now,
And
forever.
And it aired on January 17th, the year 2000. This is the first episode to air in the new millennium after the Y2K panic.
Yeah. So
Where were
they
you?
probably weren't sure if this would even air. You know, they were probably worried.
There was someone somewhere in Nickelodeon that was like, "Oh my God, these cartoons we made, they're never even going to see the light of day."
Oh my God, I can't believe we spent all the time and money making this. We could have spent it on hookers and blow, and we could have had the greatest party ever, and now we're all going to die.
I bet, dude, there are people who like spent a shitload of money on like hookers
Yeah.
and blow because they thought everything was gonna fucking end. That's funny.
Shout out to hookers and blow.
Shout out to those people who did that. If you're one of those people, we want to hear from you. Hit us up at Striped Sweater Productions at
You
Gmail.
can't have one without the other. This episode was performed in front of a live studio
Well, it was
audience.
11 minutes and 12 seconds long, and the storyboard artist was Paul Tibbett and Ennio Torreson, but it was also storyboard directed by those two.
They made the storyboards. I've made storyboards. It's funny.
That's
I can
like
share it. A lot of people don't.
I have two because I'm a film major and no big deal. And actually, fun fact: I've never shared this on the podcast, but one of my professors at school, as far as I know, her biggest accomplishment was she was the assistant editor for SpongeBob Squarepants, the movie, which was fucking sick as fuck because it was like, holy fuck, that's amazing. Like, I watched that. I love that movie. Like, you know, that's
One of my teachers was like, "Oh yeah, I did all these storyboards and stuff for Disney."
Oh yeah.
Like certain movies, I don't remember which ones, and it's just like, why are you here?
yeah. It's very cool. Some of the people you meet. In your
So yeah,
life.
they both directed it, storyboard directed, and what was the other one? Storyboard artist?
They were the artist and director. So
Yeah.
they wrote the whole thing, and that's actually the first time that's happened in the series, I believe.
Congrats, guys.
Which is why I thought it was weird. I like noticed it right away. I was like, that's kind of weird. Like, it's usually one does one and one does the other. So they
work
changed up
together.
the formula here.
Good teamwork here,
And
really.
they came up with a good episode. And it was written by those two as well as Mr. Lawrence. So it was written by them, and they did the storyboard for it. And then the animation director was Edgar Larrazabal, creative director.
Still Derek Drymon. All the time.
Yeah, he's the man.
He's the what?
The driest man in all the lawn.
Oh.
Hates
In all
getting
of
wet.
Lon.
The driest lady in all of Euphrates.
Yeah.
Isn't Euphrates a river?
I believe there is a Euphrates River.
I think there is. So that's like funny because it's like, a river, but
yeah.
he lives by the river, but he hates getting wet.
Yeah.
You do need to drink water at some point. How does he do that?
He stays out of it.
We'll have to wait until until we can get him on the show, as a guest to ask him that. Mental note. Okay, so let's go.
So we start sleepy time at nighttime. Imagine that.
Imagine this.
And SpongeBob is getting ready for bed. He's taking off his shoes, and he takes them off, and the socks stay with him.
And in case we weren't aware, he lets us know. Time for bed.
Yeah. Right?
Go on.
He takes off his shoes. The socks are still there, and then they finally fall when he puts them down. And then Gary goes in there, and he puts them on his eye stalks. He's wearing SpongeBob's day-old socks, which is funny because my dogs love to grab socks, especially when they're fresh warm.
It is actually a pet type thing to do, to mess with their owner's socks.
Yeah.
So.
But then SpongeBob says,
"Oh, Gary, you know what they say. Curiosity salted the snail. Mind your wandering eye, you little mollusk."
it's like curiosity killed the cat, and then everyone knows that when you salt a snail, it kills them.
Yeah, right.
Because they did it in It's Always Sunny. They salted the snail.
What a thing. I know. I mean, I think you can do it to a slug, too. Same type of thing. Because, I mean, really, a slug, I'm pretty sure, is in the same kind of family as
Shout out to
a
Slugfest.
snail. And shout out to...
Didn't we just talk about that?
Last episode. Yeah. Also, shout out to the UC Santa Barbara banana slugs.
Shout out to the used.
Yeah.
The bird and the worm.
Here I am. It's in my hand. And I'll savor every moment of this.
4:00 in the fucking morning. Right, and then he says something even weirder than curiosity salted the snail, right?
Right. Well, he says, "Mind your wandering eye, you little mollusk," which is a reference to this line.
Gaze at the sun with its wandering eye. Yes, it speaks of the Trinity, casting light at the sun with its wandering eye.
From the song "The Mollusk" by the band Wien, which, oh darn, should have looked this up, but I don't know exactly who. Someone, probably Steven Hillenberg, maybe someone else, I'm not sure, was a big Wien fan, and that's why Wien is constantly used, referenced, and so on and so forth within SpongeBob.
They weren't the people though that did the ripped pants song.
No, that was
like an in-home.
That was like
studio.
an in-home.
Yeah,
they hired.
So
someone
we
to
haven't.
do that.
This is the first time we've gotten anything from them in our show.
First time they've been referenced that I'm aware of.
It's kind of a reference, right?
Well,
it mainly is. But
well, the specific reference. Well, the fact that he uses the term mollusk, which. This is the mollusk is the name of the song and the album.
And Gary obviously is a mollusk.
Yeah, and they say wandering eye. So it's obviously I mean there's no doubt that they're just
There's no doubt that Gwen Stefani
right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I am a huge fan of No Doubt and Gwen Stefani.
When they were small, my coworker was talking about this. Imagine seeing No Doubt when they first started. That would have been crazy.
Imagine
small crowds and that same kind of music.
Imagine seeing Sublime and fucking Gwen Stefani perform in a fucking backyard in California, and you're drinking and smoking fucking pot and probably doing other drugs too, and you're just fucking loving life. Oh my God. It's
there.
I wish that I could fucking experience that.
Maybe
so
someday
bad.
we'll have our own No Doubt Sublime,
Yeah.
So SpongeBob goes to sleep pretty instantly, and then he goes into one of his dreams. And in this dream, it is filled with Krabby Patty burgers, giant ones on the side of this winding road, and there's spatulas sticking out of the ground. And then there's also different components of the patty. There's like a whole bunch of lettuce next to the road and tomato and everything.
Yeah, and there's like I mean, maybe not right away, but I know later at some point you see like drink cups and maybe you see like fries. I'm not sure.
It's just a Krabby Patty style dream. And in this, SpongeBob is like, we see him start to morph into his dream, and we see his, you know, like his different body parts. His eyes are like on coral, and then everything else is on a rock. So like his
something like that.
Like that. I think his eyes might be on the rock, but his mouth and thing. Yeah, his mouth is like on something else. And he's like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" And he's laughing, and it basically he merges from a rock into himself.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because when he materializes, first he doesn't have a nose, but he gets in this strange boatmobile. It looks kind of like a race car boatmobile, like a boxcar derby style.
Yeah, it's definitely a meant to be a race car for sure.
Yeah, so he like becomes himself, and then he's racing, and then as he's racing, his nose like pops out a little bit, like he has a tiny nose for a second, and then it fully goes out.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh shit. I'm driving, but I don't even have a license." And then
I'm not supposed to be doing this.
Yeah. He's a sinful little boy.
And then suddenly, out of nowhere,
like the RKO from today,
a driver's license appears. You know, we see the driver's license.
Yeah, first it has like a shitty little picture of him on it, and it's kind of funny looking, but then it zooms in.
Yeah.
And it has his face, and it's got numbers and stuff, and it says that he lives at 124 Con Street, Bikini Bottom.
So,
of course.
Yeah, that's the first time we learned that.
And then just to clarify, he does have a sex. He is a male. Also, his hair is yellow, which is important because I would say he has no hair, and we might find out later that driver's licenses do allow you to have no hair. But it says his hair is yellow, eyes are blue.
Oh my gosh.
His height, it just says 0-04. Maybe he's like 4 inches, centimeters, millimeters. Who knows?
I don't know. Right.
He's a small lad, though.
Yeah, he's a small boy. Right.
He weighs 1 ounce. Yeah.
Okay.
His birthday.
He's a tiny boy.
7/14/86. That's what, September 14?
7?
7 is it? Or no. I'm sorry.
July.
Yeah, July.
July 14th.
July 14th, 1986. So right now,
wow,
he's gonna be going into his 33rd birthday. It expires in 2003, so he still has some time based on when this came out. You know, he's got 3 years. 12/14, if it matters. But the 12/14 does show that it's 100% in the American calendar. I know it's a big deal to people on Reddit because obviously there's not 14 months.
Yeah, obviously.
Right. Everybody knows that.
Duh.
I know that. My dad's not a phone. Duh!
So anyway, where were we? Holy shit.
Oh, in the episode?
Yeah.
Right, so he has his driver's license, and he's like not, he's holding his driver's license, he's just admiring it, but he is kind of like doing turns and stuff. He even drives through a road end sign, and he's just like, wow, you know, I should have grew a mustache for my picture. He says that, like, so I would love to see SpongeBob with a mustache.
Yeah.
I know he kind of has one in the movie, but
yeah,
apparently he thinks he could grow a good mustache.
Yeah.
It's also a setup for another joke, but it is funny.
Right. He starts to lose control of the car, and then what does he hit?
But he's not even, like, driving. He hits, like, a wall.
He smashes into a rock, and he
Not the country of
he
rock.
shoots out of the car, obviously the boat mobile, because they're just like all boatmobiles for the most part that we've seen.
Yeah.
It's an open top. Flies right out, and he's just flying through the air.
And we get a funny line here because he says, "Oh man, I failed on the first rule of boating," or something like that, right? He's like, "I forgot the first rule." And you're thinking, yeah, put your fucking hands on the wheel. But no, he says, "I didn't wear my seatbelt."
Right.
It's like, dude.
It's like a funny, a bait and switch.
Right? It's like,
And
oh, of course that's what he thinks it is. That's why he doesn't have a license.
he's a dipshit when it comes to that. Right. And then he's
He's flying over and Mrs. Puff is under him.
Well, he flies over the Krusty Krab, and he's like, "Oh, the Krusty Krab," which I don't know why, but whatever.
Yeah.
Basically, because his dream is full of Krusty Krab imagery, and then he sees the Krusty Krab. Really, it lets us know, and we will see in the next episode as well, that basically, SpongeBob's whole... when you dream, it's kind of like your subconscious or whatever. Everything he dreams about is related to Krabby Patties and the Krusty Krab. He's obsessed with it. But anyway, he's flying through the air, and then Mrs. Puff...
is flying under him for some reason.
For whatever reason, is
Yeah,
also
why not?
flying through the air.
And he's like, "Hey, Mrs. Puff, look, I got my license." And she takes it away from him.
Mrs. Puff, look! I finally got my driver's license!
Not even in your dreams, Mr. Squarepants.
No! Ouch! Where am I? Is that me? Or is this me? Am I still dreaming? This must be Gary's dream. I'm gonna get a closer look.
And then he's flying, and he like flies out of his own dream bubble. And there's like a version of him that's small and it's mostly transparent.
Yeah, the dream version of himself has somehow magically exited his own dream and is now in the real world.
Yeah, and he can
And is
see his
able-
own body.
and
It's like
is-
an out of body experience.
Right, he has an out of body experience, 100%.
It is. I would like. It's kind of lucid dreaming, but it's not. I want to know.
Well,
do you have any lucid dreaming experiences?
I've had a couple, but nothing crazy at all. And I had them most frequently when I was young.
Yeah. It's been a while for me.
And when I have them, I never gain full control. Either I don't gain full control or everything just starts to like go away when I realize like what's going on.
I know there's a lot of tricks.
Which is
People on
part
Reddit try to help.
part of like how some people train themselves to do it,
So SpongeBob arrives into Gary's dream, right? So he like falls down. And he's like, "Oh, Gary's dream," and he climbs in it.
And Gary's snoring.
Yeah, he's
And-
meowing, snoring. He goes in, and there's like a lot of books, and it's like a gigantic library, and there's a man in a cloak. And he's like, "Excuse me, sir," and it turns around, and it's Gary.
Excuse
Gary,
me, miss.
He has like arms and like a robe on, and he says, "The way you bag cans had me bothered and hot."
No, he doesn't say that.
Oh,
He
you're
says,
Excuse me, sir. Have you seen
SpongeBob?
Gary?
How dare you invade the sanctity of my dreams?
Gary, you can talk!
In dreams, one is not tethered by earthly limitations.
What does that mean?
Come. For ages, dreams have been thought of as windows to another realm.
listening to his voice it's weird. It's kind of high pitched.
it's important, but you know what's funny? And I don't know about this. You know what it reminds me of?
No.
Olmec from Legends of the Hidden Temple. When he would tell his stories, think
Yeah.
about it.
Kind of,
Sounds
yeah.
almost exactly the same. Is it the same guy? We need to look it up.
I don't think so. I feel like I might have picked up on it, but
Who the fuck voiced Olmec? God damn it. Wikipedia. D. Bradley Baker. not only the announcer, but also the giant talking rock god Olmec in Legends of the Hidden Temple. Reoccurring cartoon characters on blah blah blah, Johnny Bravo, Dexter's Lab, SpongeBob. So he might have been. I don't know. It just says he did voices on
It
SpongeBob.
says right here that he is Dream Gary. I'm
Yep.
looking on the SpongeBob.
How fucking
media.
crazy is that?
I never would have guessed that.
I just fucking guessed that voice was the same guy who did Olmec, and I was fucking right. I just guessed that shit. I'm gonna figure out a way to edit that to keep that all in the podcast because that was
That's
fucking
insane.
beautiful.
He's also Squilliam. He's Bubble Bass. What?
No shit.
I don't
That's
know. Well,
crazy.
it shows these pictures and it shows the announcer. Oh man.
It makes sense. I mean, he's just a voice actor. That's what he.
He was number one. He's Smitty Werben Jagerman Jensen.
No
and
way.
he's the sea cucumber.
No
Kevin.
way.
He's Kevin.
No way.
What?
Dude, and he was Olmec too.
That's crazy.
Dude, I can't believe that though. Like, I heard that was like, I mean, that's crazy. When was the last time I watched Legends of the Hidden Temple? Like fucking 10 years ago at least. Like,
You know I have that shirt, right?
which one?
Red Jaguars.
Wow. Which team do you think I am? I have a primary and a secondary.
I would say the Purple Parrots.
That's my secondary.
Oh, okay. What
So-
about Silver Snakes?
That's it. Buddy.
Okay, all right. Everybody's Silver Snakes. I didn't want to throw it out
Really?
there.
Is that
Yeah,
really?
it's like a
That's the
common
one?
thing. So Gary says something weird. He quotes something and he goes, "That was Emily Dickinson." And SpongeBob goes, "Who?" Because obviously
Why
Gary
would SpongeBob know him?
Gary
Or
in
her?
this universe is like in the dream world, he's very smart.
He's super smart, and he's got that super smart voice, which it's Olmec's voice, which I'm so happy that I figured that out on my own.
Of course, you'll fit it in there.
Yeah.
So then he gives this this poem that I've always remembered since I was young because my friend said it, and
Yes.
I was like,
I have a memory with
I have
this,
to remember
too.
this as well. And he goes, "Well, let me grab something more your style."
There once was a man from Peru who dreamed he was eating his shoe. He awoke with a fright in the middle of the night to find that his dream had come true.
Ah, gee, Gary, you sure are smart.
Did you think my shell was full of hot air?
I remember there was a time where we were tasked with writing like a short poem or something like that, a short rhyme.
You didn't
And-
write that.
No, some other like two girls came
Yeah.
up and literally just said that verbatim, and the teacher was like, "Oh, okay, yeah." Teacher had no fucking
That's so
clue.
funny.
I was like,
Yeah, why would
What
they be
the
watching
fuck?
SpongeBob unless they had kids around?
I'm
our
pretty
age?
sure this is not from SpongeBob. I'm pretty sure this rhyme predates SpongeBob, but I might be wrong.
I
on
always
that.
thought of it as it's almost a play on "There Once Was a Man from Nantucket" because that was a really dirty.
It's
thing.
similar, right?
You know, he had a cock so long he could suck it.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, everybody know that.
Which that's a limerick.
Of
which,
course.
if you didn't know, the listener or you, Zach, I don't know.
No, I do.
Sometimes
Yeah,
you
it's
don't
a
know
limerick.
things.
So-
but a limerick, that's a type of poem that is in that style. Yes. Right. I mean, obviously, Gary is one of the smarter characters based on this dream.
Yeah.
This is, I think, where that comes from initially. That thought.
And SpongeBob's pretty much like, "I'm gonna leave," and he's like, "All right, well, beware your wandering eye." He gives him a similar warning
Yeah.
that he gave Gary before falling asleep.
Right. Similar warning that references the song by Wien. And then
Yeah.
SpongeBob.
He walks out
Yep.
of the dream.
Yep. And
Dream SpongeBob walks over toward the neighbors' houses.
Yep, and he goes. Oh, this is funny because this is kind of funny because he passes Squidward's house.
Yeah.
But he goes to Patrick's house for whatever reason.
Squidward's is higher up. He's just not looking upward.
This was the order. Yeah, this was the order that it was supposed to go in for whatever reason. And he goes into Patrick's dream, and in Patrick's dream, Patrick is riding a seahorse, similar to in human life. We have these horses that you can put a penny or a quarter into, and they'll move around.
It's mostly a penny, but this one is a quarter.
Did you ever ride one
Yes.
as a kid? I used to ride them at the one at Meyer.
His penny
That's
was
so
the
funny.
horse's name, right?
Well, yeah, it was a penny horse, I remember.
Yeah,
You put a
'cause it was
penny in it.
and that was the name of the horse.
Yep.
So, SpongeBob sees that Patrick is riding this horse, and he's like, Patrick, you know you could do anything in your dream. Patrick's like, yeah, I know that. He's like, look, you could even be a skyscraper.
This is kind of where we see the lucid dreaming really come into play.
SpongeBob really has control of his dreams. He turns into a skyscraper, and he's like, yeah, okay. He's like, well,
and he's like, yep.
what about this? There's 1 million of me. You can make 1 million of you. And he, like, there's a bunch of him there. And then he turns back into one. He's like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, Patrick is so like dull
He's
that
like,
all
yeah,
he
I'm
wants
just
to do is
enjoying-
ride this little
Yeah.
seahorse ride.
I know I'm dreaming, but I'm just riding
He's
the
like, this is
seahorse."
fine. SpongeBob says, tartar sauce, I'm going to a different dream.
And he
Patrick is
walks
like,
off.
okay, bye, SpongeBob. He's so like boring in this.
Yeah, and he's like rocking, and then his rocking horse stops.
His time runs up.
Yeah, of
Runs
course. He's
out,
like,
yeah.
oh, well, of course I'm in my dream. I have quarters. He reaches in his pocket, grabs a quarter, goes to put it in the machine. It falls.
He misses.
Yeah, it rolls into a drain. This is how it happened in his own dream that he knows he has control over. And then he goes, oh, man, that was my last quarter. And then he spends the remaining seconds of the shot just sitting on the horse, not moving.
Just sitting there,
because that
staring
is
into
now,
space.
That's now what he's going to do. He's not going to imagine himself a quarter or a machine that works without quarters. He is going to just sit there and
Do
just
nothing.
enjoy sitting on a plastic horse, which is not comfortable when it's not moving.
I just thought it was so funny too because like he's what are the chances that Patrick is also a lucid dreamer and is aware that he is dreaming?
Well,
when he's
everyone
dreaming?
here kind of is.
I
it
guess
seems
that's
like.
fair. I guess that's fair to say. So yeah, maybe I'm just an
SpongeBob
idiot
being
for
in
bringing
it,
that up.
like, yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, he loses his quarter, and SpongeBob leaves the dream, and he walks
sees
back
Squidward.
towards his own house, and he sees Squidward's cloud, which is coming out of his window. So SpongeBob, like,
Of course, I have to.
Yeah, he's like, I must. Blows himself up in a weird kind of way to
reach up
inflate
top.
himself, and then he floats into the dream, and then he's like,
He's at a concert, like an opera hall. almost.
yeah, like an opera house type thing, and Squidward is on stage playing his clarinet, and he's got a powdered wig, and SpongeBob is in the audience, and he's like, psst, Squidward.
Yeah, and he's like, what?
This whole segment is so memorable for me. Like, this is like this is like prime SpongeBob. Like, when I think about SpongeBob, this is like prime SpongeBob right here.
First, he's kind of pissed. He's like, what are you doing, SpongeBob?
Squidward.
Yeah,
you're saying.
Squidward's
Yes.
kind of mad, and he's like, I'm about to play. And then the king is out, right?
Yep.
He's like a king type guy. I don't know what he is, but he's a big shot.
Yeah. I mean, he's the
He's
king.
got a
yeah.
big, he has like a robe and
He's
like
got a crown,
scepter type.
He's like, hey, Squidward at first. Right. And then
Yeah.
he's like, SpongeBob. And then the king says,
He says,
why would you stop playing? And that's when he refers to him as Wolfgang Amadeus Tentacles.
Yeah.
And he's like, yes, yes. And he continues playing. And then that's when SpongeBob is like starting
Laughing
to talk
with the
with the
king.
king. Yeah. And that's when Squidward is like, he stops and he's like, SpongeBob, stop it.
SpongeBob, and he like breaks his clarinet in half.
Yeah, and he's like,
so mad.
He's like, I have not instructed you to stop. Now play.
And then he's like, and he looks down, and SpongeBob's like, Squidward, hey. And he's like in the shape of a clarinet. He's pretty much like, play me.
I came here to hear beautiful music.
Right. He's like, no. And the king's pretty much like,
If I don't get my wish, it'll be your head.
Yep. So Squidward's like, all right. And he starts putting his mouth on
and that's
SpongeBob's parts.
Yeah, Squidward.
On his reed.
I love the SpongeBob in clarinet form. Like, he's even got like a brown, like the bell is like brown to simulate his pants.
Yeah, so Squidward's playing him, and he's just like,
SpongeBob! Why have you stopped playing that wonderful music?
His music touches me ever so. I fear that my tears might stain my petticoat.
It's so good.
you're right. He like stops, and then the king is like, why did you stop playing this wonderful music?
He's got tears in his eyes.
Yeah,
and
this other guy in the audience says, my tears might stain my petticoat, and he's like crying at how beautiful
I
it
love
is.
how like uppity and like it's almost like this is back in time. Essentially, it is back in time with all the scenery and the wigs that people are wearing. This is in like the 1700s or something like that.
So they all love it. Squidward is like, oh great, they love me, and then the people in the audience rush the stage. They grab SpongeBob the clarinet and they take it back, and they're like, what kind of instrument is this? Oh my word. And everybody runs past Squidward, even the king. And it's unfortunate because Squidward really technically is the one who played it, but it seemed like they knew.
Yeah, right. They're all like, oh, this beautiful instrument. Like, what is this beautiful thing that made this sound? It's not the guy who played it, which is like how it always goes in real life. Nobody gives a shit about the instrument.
What is that beautiful piano?
It just matters.
It's like,
really, it doesn't matter. Right. It has the instrument you use, while it does matter in some sense, like when we're talking about guitars or pianos.
well, I just watched the dude play the whole Through Fire and Flames on a recorder. This week.
That's
and
cool.
It's insane.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love how that's like still relevant fucking 15 years later.
Yeah.
After that song like had its initial like
Guitar
boom
Hero
of
3.
popularity. Yeah.
Guitar Hero 3 did it.
People are still fucking covering it, and it's still fucking
and it's
cool.
In Beat Saber, and it's hard as shit.
Well, it is an insane song, to be fair. Like,
so SpongeBob ends up being out of the dream, and then he's like, oh look, I'm at Sandy's.
he goes into Sandy's dream, which obviously he's going to at this point.
Right,
He
and then he
goes in.
just walks out of a door and ends up falling out of an airplane.
Right, he walks out of like an airplane door, essentially. Yeah,
Yeah.
right, and
Not knowing
starts
what it
falling,
is.
and he's like, "Whoa!" Obviously as you would be. But this is a pretty common thing in dreams, to fly or to be falling.
Right.
I mean, like,
but Sandy appears. She's like, "Oh, hey, SpongeBob, what are you doing
right. She's
here?"
skydiving. You know,
Right,
she's
and
got
he's
the
like-
board and everything.
He's like, "This seems dangerous," and they're both like doing flips and stuff around each other. They're doing
Right.
tricks. She's like, "We're gonna fall from this many feet, and we're gonna land on this here target." And he's like, "How are we gonna do that?" Well, all you need is a parachute. And SpongeBob, being in Dream World, he makes his shoes super big, and she's like,
Yeah, his
"Not pair of shoes,
not pair of shoes.
parachute."
And he's like, "Gotcha, not parakeet."
Right, he has like a little parakeet on his finger.
He pulls a parakeet
Not
out.
parakeet, para, and then she
At that point, she hits the ground.
well, no, she hits the truck.
The truck. I'm sorry. The truck
the
full of
clam
clam manure.
Yeah,
Which
I wrote maneuver.
as
I don't
fu-
know why.
Yeah, I know
The clam
why.
maneuver.
I know why. But no, this would theoretically be a reference to Back to the Future, where running into a truck of manure was a reoccurring theme throughout the trilogy.
Yeah, but she's
Are you familiar with Back to the Future?
Yeah.
Okay. That's my favorite movie. I don't know if you know that about me.
Did not.
Yeah.
But it's funny because she's like, not parakeet, paramedic. She hits it and then says
Right.
paramedic.
She hits the truck and says medic, which is an excellent gag. Excellent. Like really, really well timed and perfect.
Yeah.
Really good. Just a small gag that most kids wouldn't even find funny, but very funny, realistically.
So SpongeBob leaves the dream and he's like walking home. He's like, all right, I'm done with dreams. He's like, but Mr. Krabs is right here. I got to check out his dream. He jumps in. There's candy. There's flowers. There's like photographs in frames of teenage boys that go to high school. And we look over and there's a tea party. And it's actually Pearl's dream.
Yeah, he's like Mr. Krabs, like he's expecting Mr. Krabs, and it's not. So it's Pearl, and she's like, "Hello, SpongeBob." I love the way she's just like
Hello,
so.
SpongeBob.
She's so like welcoming.
They've finally seen each other since prom.
Yeah, it's true. It's funny though the way that they that the characters whose dreams he enters, they seem to know that he's like entered them by his own will. Yeah. But she's like, she's like, "Hello, SpongeBob," It's funny. But she's like, "Oh, you're just in time for the tea party." And he's like, "I was just looking for your dad, actually." And she's like, "Oh, he's next door." And
yeah,
she's kind of like disappointed in a way, I guess.
Of course, you
But
don't
she's like-
understand the sophistication of tea parties.
Yeah, boys don't understand the sophistication of tea parties.
Right,
Which is
Mr. Snuffle?
Right. But this is funny because, yeah, she's having like a tea party with stuffed animals. So it's kind of weird because I thought her to be high school aged because of the prom and whatnot. But this almost makes her more like middle school.
And the letter on her, the Pearl thing with the cheerleader.
Right. I mean, but this
She
almost...
is in high school. We know that. But, yeah, it is very childish. But it's a dream. It's whatever.
I guess she's just a sweet, innocent girl.
So he jumps out of her dream and gets into Mr. Krabs' dream. He's just floating as a sponge in the water.
Yeah, he's doing like the dead man's float type thing.
And he runs into a boat, and it's Mr. Krabs fishing.
Yeah,
which
is
fishing, we see it again.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, it was like, damn, dude, fishing again. Why the fuck are the undersea guys fishing? It makes no sense at fucking all. It makes no sense.
But what would Mr. Krabs be fishing for? He asks Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob does. Mr. Krabs says that he is picking Neptune's pocket. And he's like, okay. And he's like, I'm catching the Moby Dollar. And you can see his hook is connected to this gigantic dollar.
Obvious reference to Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And, he's reeling it in. And he's like, you see her? I got her. Here she comes. And there she blows. And then she starts spitting out pennies. And SpongeBob is like, pennies.
Pennies. He thinks it's funny.
Yeah, right. And he's like, never mind the small change, lad, which is funny to see Mr. Krabs disparage any type of money. But in this case, that it's the Moby Dollar. This is more important.
Yeah.
This is the Moby Dollar we're talking about.
So he says, you got to get the net. And he's like, oh, you mean this net? And pulls out a net. And he's
A
like,
regular net.
No. He's like, the net in me back pocket.
Yeah.
And he grabs in the back pocket.
He calls
and
it
a gigantic wallet.
He calls it the money net.
Yeah.
And he pulls it out. And then that's when we see Mr. Krabs' driver's license.
Right. He lives at 3541 Anchor Way. He's a male. His hair color is NA.
Not applicable.
Right. So SpongeBob has yellow hair. Which you
Which
think
is-
he was just bald.
Which is
and
why.
yellow.
Right. This leads us to believe that SpongeBob actually has hair of some kind, even though it appears that where his hair would just be his head. There's no distinction between the top of his head and his hair, but apparently he has yellow hair.
At prom he had hair.
Yeah,
So-
black hair though.
So he is 0-07 tall, whatever that measurement is. He is almost twice as tall as SpongeBob. He weighs 5. His weight is just 5. SpongeBob's was 1 ounce. Krabs weighs 5. No measurement. He was born 11/30.
Opposite.
42.
Yep.
42 is a long time ago.
Yeah, that's
77
no.
years
Is that
ago.
what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, my friend. Mr. Krabs is an old ass man. He's a grown ass man. He's got that grave plot. He's got that diaper money.
Yeah, that's true. He had that wife pussy.
At some point, obviously, with a whale, I guess.
But now his license expires on his birthday in 2002. So SpongeBob got his not on his birthday for some reason, so his expired a different day in 03.
02, but yes.
SpongeBob's was in 03.
No, SpongeBob was 02.
I wrote down 03, 12,
Oh.
14, 03.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, he grabs out this gigantic wallet. He looks at the ID, and he goes, "Oh, Mr. Krabs, you look good in a mustache."
Yeah.
So after saying, "Oh, I should have got a mustache," he's like, "Damn, Krabs, you look good in a mustache," on his license. So then he grabs the giant wallet and he gets it ready. Krabs is like fishing with this giant dollar. He brings it in, and SpongeBob catches him in the wallet.
And
He puts the wallet under his right arm,
Yeah,
and then he reaches out to shake his hand as he
Right. So
congratulates
he lets
him.
go of the wallet. Mr. Krabs is like, "No, don't let go." And then SpongeBob's like, "What?" And it's like, "Oh no!" And it's like bouncing away. And SpongeBob's like, "No, no." And this is a real thing that happens if you've ever been fishing. Fish
Yeah,
will
they do.
bounce
They
right out
will.
of a boat
Yeah.
if you let them. And he's like, "No, no." Yeah. And he's like, "This will make a great fish story." That's what SpongeBob says. But yeah, anyway, it ends up flying out, and then Krabs is very upset. So he's like, SpongeBob, and he's like, "Yes, you're fired." And then he
throws a rope around him.
he like,
Well,
he-
first, I wanted to mention, as the dollar it escapes out of the wallet and jumps in the water. As it's splashing, it's like a cha-ching, cha-ching, as it's like jumping in and out.
It's a very memorable part of the episode.
Yeah.
Honestly, all of the dreams are very memorable. It's funny, when I thought of this episode, I couldn't think of anything besides the Gary section of it.
Right.
And it's like, damn, dude, there's a lot of other stuff, a lot of memorable stuff. I just forgot,
Yeah.
It was a good episode. I liked it. I like it. We're not done yet.
So he throws a rope over SpongeBob, and then he's like, "You're fired!" But in this case, fired is like fired out of a cannon, because what he does is the rope is attached to a gun, which is attached to a plunger,
Yep.
and he shoots the plunger. SpongeBob gets thrown out, goes over the Krusty Krab, ends
Yeah.
up in Plankton's dream.
Sends
Pretty
him
much
into
has
the
no
Plankton's
choice.
dream, which is Plankton lives at the Chum Bucket.
Yeah.
So he goes into the dream cloud, and he sticks to a building, and he's stuck to it. And Plankton is like huge. He's walking around, and he's like, "Oh, Zap, I see you, Zap." And we actually hear "On my leg" at this point.
We get on my leg. He goes to the Krusty Krab.
This
He's
whole
like,
dream
"Oh, the
is really
Krusty
memorable
Krab."
too. Yeah.
And he smashes it. He's like, "Crush."
Yeah. And
And then he grabs the sign and he starts licking it like it's a lollipop, and he even says, Lick.
Yeah. I love that. SpongeBob is like, this is a nightmare. And then he's trying to run away, and then we hear Gary, and he's like, meow, meow. And then SpongeBob, who gets really, like, teary-eyed almost. And I remember this as a kid feeling very, like, oh, no, Gary. You know,
Yeah.
like, I remember feeling like they make you feel bad for him for a second. Because Gary's all alone and Plankton's coming towards him, and SpongeBob's kind of freaking out, like, oh no, my pet.
Yeah.
And he's like...
Plankton is saying, here, kitty, kitty.
Yeah, right, which is the most direct reference to Gary being a cat that we have had thus far, outside of him saying meow and singing on the fence in the nighttime. Bless you. So SpongeBob's freaking out. Plankton is coming towards him, and he's like, "Here comes my foot!" When SpongeBob comes over to Gary, like
he's gonna step on him. Gary and SpongeBob.
Jinkies, and he's like, "What?" And he's like, "Yow!" And then it's revealed that SpongeBob has formed himself into the shape of a push pin.
Yeah,
and
he's a spike.
He goes, I think he's got the point. And Plankton.
Well, right. I love that line though by Plankton earlier. Peekaboo! Here comes my foot.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like clever at all. It's just kind of like
it's
very direct. It's funny.
It's meant to sound clever, but
like
it's
an
not.
anti-joke.
Right?
Almost,
Yeah. It's like a bait and switch.
Plankton's leg,
he's like punctured, so he starts to deflate.
And he's very small again. And he's like, "Oh, come on, we can talk about this." And the townspeople who he was just torturing, they go to step on him, and he goes, "Not the face."
Yeah, and it's Fred, the boy whose leg is hurt, stomps on him.
Yeah, with his hurt leg. So then he actually wakes up because his dream ends. You can see the lines go like back to the bed as they slowly fall. So this is the first person to actually wake up while SpongeBob was in there, and then he runs back home.
But Dream SpongeBob is still Dream SpongeBob, so he's like, okay, I'm going to go back home. And he's like, that was fun, but it's good to be back in my own dream cloud. And he goes in there, and...
Yeah, he jumps in his dream cloud, and it's his bed.
Yeah, and he's trying to, just relax, and all, immediately, pretty much, Squidward, Sandy, Krabs, Patrick, and Plankton and Gary all start to circle around his head, just like their faces, and they're all like,
SpongeBob!
SpongeBob! What do you want from me? Leave me alone! No. Bob! Hey, what are y'all doing in your pajamas? Are we having a slumber party?
No, we are not having a slumber party.
Do us all a favor, SpongeBob, and stay out of our dreams. SpongeBob.
Take a hike. Don't we get enough of you during the day?
Does anyone have a quarter?
He wakes up, and he's like, oh, whoa. All these people. And then they're actually surrounding his bed, and they're like, SpongeBob, could you not go into our dreams anymore? And they all look really mad. And it's funny because everyone's there except Patrick. Even Pearl is there. And it's like, Pearl, did he really ruin your freaking tea party?
He didn't
was
mess
there for
with
like
Pearl's
2
dream
seconds.
at all, right?
Like, Pearl, F yourself.
I remember thinking that even as a kid.
Me
why
too.
the frick is Pearl there?
Yeah.
She has no right to be there at all.
They're just like, oh, she's in that.
Other than, I guess,
her.
Mr. Krabs woke up all pissed off, maybe.
Yeah, and she's there too, and he's like,
because
we're
it's like,
going to Spongy's.
my dad just fucking woke me up, and he's all pissed off. Fuck you, SpongeBob.
So they're all there, and they're mad. Patrick walks up, and he's like in his sleeping gear, and he gives the last line of the episode.
Yep.
Does anybody have a quarter? Does anyone have a quarter?
Yep. And they all look at him.
So he still can't conjure a quarter up in his own dream.
That's all he's worried about. He just wants to ride that fucking seahorse.
Yeah, and he needs one physically to do it in a dream now.
All right, well, I think probably my line of the episode was why have you stopped playing this beautiful music?
I think he
Just
actually
because-
says wonderful. I remembered it as beautiful too.
No, he doesn't.
But when he
says
said it, I
beautiful.
thought he says,
Oh, he does say, why have you stopped playing that wonderful music? But earlier he says, I came here to hear beautiful music.
right.
So he does say it at some point. That's
Yeah.
funny that we both got that same thing mixed up.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, good episode. Like, way better than I remember it being. Because I remember thinking, Sleepy Time, that's not the best episode. It's actually pretty darn good. Not going to lie. It's got a lot of memorable parts. All of the dreams are pretty memorable. For whatever reason, I couldn't remember any of them except for Gary's until I watched them, and then I was like, "Wait, these are all gold." And I remembered them all as soon as they started,
Right.
which is like not been something that's happened too much for me up until this point. Like, this was like one where I was like, "Oh yeah." I knew all the jokes, parachute, parakeet, all that stuff came to me before it happened. So
Yeah.
it was like I really caught on as it was going on. I was like, yeah, this is a good one.
So this is Suds, and who made this thing?
Well, it's 11 minutes and 34 seconds long. Storyboard artists Paul Tibbett and Ennio Torreson Jr. Storyboard directed by the same two. So as we said earlier, this is some sort of new production formula that they started doing at this point. Written by those two along with Mr. Lawrence. Animation director was Edgar Larzabal, and creative director...
Was Derek Drymon.
Correct.
So we start with...
Shelley.
Yeah. So we can see SpongeBob sleeping again, as we just saw in the last episode, and we can see Shelly. We can see the little hole in the side of his, on his floor. To the side
Shelley
of his
is
bed.
SpongeBob's pet scallop, for those who don't know.
Yeah. And we're on Shelly watch, and this is another appearance.
Yep.
So
One of like 5 appearances, maybe.
So instantly we go into his dream, of course, because we have just been in dreams. Let's do
Which
it
is,
again.
we were both like, whoa, this is weird.
Yeah, like
It's
right
funny.
after,
It starts with him.
immediately.
It starts with him going to bed and dreaming
Yeah.
again. And it's raining Krabby Patties.
Yep. And then he's like grabbing him. He's like, oh my. And then he wakes up and he's eating his pillow.
Which this reminded me of Fairly Odd Parents.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And this is weird. He wakes up and he like kicks the pillow off the edge of the bed, and then he jumps down onto the pillow on all fours, and like, I don't know what that was about. I was like so confused when I saw that. I was like, wait, what is going on? Is there a joke happening right now? No. It was just
kinda weird.
It was just a weird like thing for him to do. And then that's when he notices, oh, Gary's asleep. I should be quiet. Which is like, I guess maybe that's why he put the pillow on the ground, to be quiet. I don't know. It was like, why did he do that? I don't know.
but
That
you
it
can-
made
you
me.
can-
It like caught me off guard immediately. I was like, what was the point of that? Like,
Yeah, but you can hear his stomach grumble, and he's like, oh, time for a quick midnight snack. And he's tiptoeing, even though he's in his shoes.
he
now.
doesn't want to. Yeah, he doesn't want to wake up Gary because
Right,
he
he's
sleeps
sleeping
in his shoes.
but you can see them like make
Even though in
individual
the
toes out
in
of
the
them.
last episode he slept
He took 'em
barefoot.
off. He
That
did.
might have been the first time we ever saw SpongeBob's bare
Actual
feet.
toes,
Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, he was sleeping in his shoes. He tiptoes over to the stairs, and then he does like
Yeah.
a quick like
It's almost like a piano.
piano.
Noise, but
Yep,
it's
I was
like,
gonna say yeah.
So SpongeBob is downstairs now in his kitchen. He goes, nothing like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you can see the jar says C-nut.
Right,
C-nut.
C-nut.
And he
right.
says, like, it's going to be good to get him back to sleep.
Which that's funny because we find out that they do have peanuts in a later episode.
Yeah,
but they
they
also
do.
have C-nuts.
Yeah.
Continue.
So he eats it, and he's like, good, this will put me to sleep. Eats one bite, falls asleep.
Immediately it falls asleep like face first on the fucking table, like completely passed out. He left the fridge and the freezer open. That's not good. And it does not bode well for him at all. Because as the night goes on, the entire house freezes over. Everything is frozen. SpongeBob is completely fucking, he's turned blue. He's so frozen.
Yeah,
Which
everything is in ice blocks.
we have, I've never been this crazy, but we've all had that instance, I'm sure, in our life where we wake up and we're like extremely cold or like extremely hot, and it's like, what the fuck? What's going on? How was I even asleep? Like, how am I this cold right now? Like, how did my body not wake me up? Like,
I remember being there.
Yeah, it's happened to all of us, I'm sure.
Dude, I remember I was in my brother's house. I was so dumb. He had like a blanket draped over his couch all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, he likes draping the blanket over the couch. If I wear it, if I'm like using it to sleep, he'll be mad because he wants it over the couch because that's the look that he's going for. So I'm like, I'm just going to use these pillows as a blanket. I froze my ass off.
Oh my God.
And he's just like, why wouldn't you use those? And now I'm thinking of it. I'm just like, you just throw shit everywhere. It's like, I don't give a fuck what you use.
Right. Why would he care? Right.
It takes 2 seconds to drape it back. But I was like, no, I'm going to be super respectful.
I totally get it. Like, you're like just thinking like an idiot. And you're just like, I'm going to be a good boy and not use this blanket.
Yeah.
Even though it's going to fucking make my life hell.
Yeah, it's going to be a horrible night. I'm going to be up every half hour freezing. So it's so frozen that SpongeBob, you can see his TV is completely in an ice cube.
It's so
and
good.
The weatherman is on there, and it's like snow in the back, and he's shivering.
Yeah.
Like, even the weatherman through the TV can feel it.
Yeah.
And then you see his bedroom. Everything's covered in ice blocks, including his alarm clock, which starts to go off. And
breaking the ice.
Yeah, it breaks the ice so it can actually move. And it does wake up SpongeBob.
Yeah, and SpongeBob wakes up and he's like, "Oh no!" He's shivering and he's like, "The fridge!" And he like slides along the floor to shut it, and he sits down. He's still shivering. He can't get warm, and he ends up trying to like stand up and like do stuff, but he ends up sliding right up the stairs, which is kind of like converse of what he did before.
Yeah, he ends up
where he slid down the stairs, sort of. But
he ends up in like his study area.
Well,
first.
His library, so to speak.
Yeah, and he's like just, he's kind of going across all the walls.
Yeah, he's like sliding along the walls. The room is like
Yeah.
circular, basically, because he's sliding along it nonstop, and he slides out the window, and he slides around the house, and then back in.
Yeah, so he breaks both of his windows that are visible
into his bedroom window, and he's on the ground.
We shouldn't mention, when he goes in the study area, there is a painting of himself in a captain hat, like Captain Crunch.
Right.
He's wearing a floaty of like a purple or like a pink dinosaur thing, and he's holding a spatula up in the air. So it's definitely something he had commissioned.
Yeah.
Because he had the spatula.
I know, it's really
He's
funny.
like, I feel most comfortable in the floaty.
The scene happens so fast too that you would never notice it unless you paused it, which is just funny because it's like someone drew that, I don't know, and it's good.
It's like it takes the same amount of time,
and
it's funny.
But it's just funny too to see because it's like, oh my gosh, that's hilarious that he has that picture, you know.
Yeah, and you can see his chair that's on a hook for some reason.
Right, that's his library chair. That's how it was in the other episode as well.
Yeah, so he's like swirling all around. He breaks both of his windows, and then he's like back toward his bed. His like nose is stuck down, and he has to like pull it off. Everything's so cold. He's like, all right, well, go to bed. He grabs his blanket, puts it on, and it's just like glass. It shatters instantly. It's completely frozen as well.
Yep, and at this point we see Gary, who is wearing a hat and earmuffs. And, well, I guess he's wearing a hat on his shell, so to speak.
Right.
And then he's got earmuffs on his
eye
eyes.
socks.
his eye stalks.
He meows, and SpongeBob's like, "Oh no, I don't get the flu. I only get the suds."
Right, and he's like, and he meows again, and then he's like, "Oh, don't be silly, Gary. Yeah,
If I had the
right.
suds, I would have bubbles coming out of me.
Right, and that's when he sneezes, and guess what happens? Bubbles
Bubbles
come
come out, and they're,
of
like,
his
pink.
pores. Yep.
And he like keeps sneezing, and eventually he like pulls his underwear up over his face,
Right.
and he sneezes into it to avoid like some of the bubbles. But really, like, dude, your dick was just in that area, and then you just pulled it up to your face.
Yeah,
What
nice
is wrong
one.
with you?
Nice one, SpongeBob. And then Gary meows again, and he's like, "No, I like wearing my underwear like this." And then Gary meows again, and he's like, "I'm not sick. I'm going to work." And then he's at the Krusty Krab, and he is sneezing all over the place.
Wait, you didn't mention? He says, "I like wearing my underwear like this," and then he turns around, and we can see he has two giant butt cheeks.
Right, right.
And then they each pop because they're actually just bubbles, but they're like big old butt cheeks at first as he's wedging himself.
I forgot that. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. But yeah, so he's like, "I'm not sick. I'm going to work." And Mr. Krabs is, he's like sneezing all over the place. He's trying to work though, and
He's even pulling his hat down and sneezing in his hat.
And Mr. Krabs walks in and he's like, "SpongeBob, what's holding up those patties?" SpongeBob looks like shit.
Yeah, his legs are all wobbly too, and
And
he's
he's
all
like-
dried out
He's
yellow.
shaky, yeah,
looking.
and he's like, right away, and he's like, "SpongeBob, what's wrong with you? You're paler than a baby seahorse."
Yeah, which are apparently pale things.
Pretty pale, yeah. And he's like, and then at that point, Gary appears for a split second, and it's funny the way that Gary is animated onto the screen. He's like, he slides in and then slides right off,
Yeah.
and then is not seen again.
Pretty much, Krabs is like, "What's wrong with you?" And Gary meows. He's like, "The suds."
Yeah, right. He basically rats SpongeBob out, and then you don't see Gary again. And Gary, I mean, why the fuck would Gary be at the Krusty Krab? It's so random. But anyway, SpongeBob is like, "No, here's the patty," and he's like, "All right, SpongeBob, you're too sick to work." And he's like, "No, I swear I'm good." And he's like, "No, go home." And he's trying to send him home, and then
Maybe you're right.
he's like nothing personal, I just can't have you sneezing all over my food. He's like yelling that out the door as SpongeBob's leaving, and
Right.
all
And
the
the
people
people are-
inside
yeah.
hear him, and they start to panic, and he's like, "No," and so
leg.
he shoots himself.
We
in
get
the
another
foot.
My Leg 2 episodes.
Yeah,
in the
2
half-hour
my
block.
legs, and then SpongeBob is back at home, and he's like, "Oh, I feel horrible." He sneezes,
Yeah,
and
he's like, "I need to call Sandy." And as he does, his eyeball just completely falls
Yeah.
down to like the lower part of his body, and he looks crazy.
he's so decrepit.
Yeah, but we don't see him right now. And he goes, "Hi, Sandy.
Yeah.
Would you like to escort me to the doctors?" Like, escort me to the doctors? Who says that?
Hello!
Sandy, I'm sick. Can you escort me to the doctors?
Oh, sure, SpongeBob. I'll be over there faster than a barefoot jackrabbit on a hot, greasy griddle in the middle of August with
Yeah,
a...
okay, Sandy, thanks.
It sounds so funny the way he says, "Can you escort me to the doctors?" I don't know why.
Yeah.
Just the way it sounds with the nasaliness of his sick voice. It's so funny.
And Sandy is down. She says, "All right, cool.
yeah,
I'll be
I
there
mean-
faster than a barefoot jackrabbit on a hot, greasy griddle in the middle of August." And he's like,
Yeah,
okay. He like cuts her off. He's like, "All right, bye." Not trying to listen
Yeah,
to your
thanks,
fucking
thanks.
long analogies.
And then at that point, SpongeBob is getting all bundled up, getting ready to go. He's got a hat and a jacket on. The doorbell rings, and he opens the door. It's Patrick. And he's like, "Oh, are you going skiing, SpongeBob?" And he's like, "No, I'm sick. I'm going to the doctor." And he's like, "No, you can't." He's like, "Why not?"
Well, I once knew this guy who knew this guy who
Went
to
to
the
the
doctor
doctor.
once.
And
it
he
was
said it was
horrible.
horrible, right?
Yeah. They made him wait in the waiting room, and SpongeBob's like, all right, is that it?
Yeah.
And he's like, no, they made him read old magazines.
And that's when SpongeBob's like, oh no,
And
that
really,
sounds
it's
pretty
like,
bad.
It's like going to the dentist or doctors without having a phone back in the day. Pretty much ridiculous. It's like, oh great, I wonder what these people talked about half a year ago. Or it's like, hey, I'm gonna find all the Waldos even though I'm 25.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then he's like,
and then then they touch you
pull
with
out
the stethoscope.
and that's when SpongeBob's like, no. And he's like, yes, it's a device so sinister, so icy cold when it touches you, which is so true because
When it touches your icy cold bare flesh.
yeah, it's so icy when it touches your bare flesh, which is true. You know, when they put it up under your shirt, you're like, yes, that's so true. But yeah, and then at that point, he's like, you got to help me get better, Patrick. He's like, I don't want to go to the doctor, you know? And he's like, well, yeah, of course I will. What are friends for, you know? And at that point, he plugs all of SpongeBob's holes with the corks. And he's like, yeah, this will keep all the bubbles in. He's like,
also,
voila.
there was a part where a bubble went up to Patrick, and it like went to where his nose was. And it stood there for a second, and then it popped. It was almost like a clown nose, you know? Just a fun little visual thing.
SpongeBob is skeptical about the cure of the corks that Patrick has given him, and he's like, he starts sneezing pretty much immediately, and he grows larger with each sneeze. And Patrick is like, I'm shrinking. And and he's
because
like,
he's getting so much bigger. And
because
then
SpongeBob is getting
finally,
bigger.
Yeah, SpongeBob finally breaks like the little table thing he's on.
I'm shrinking! No! Please don't hurt me!
No bubbles! Patrick, your treatment is working!
You think so?
Sure! At this rate, I'll be cured in no time! In fact, I'm gonna call Sandy and tell her not to come. Thanks, Dr. Patrick!
And they said I'd never make anything out of myself.
He sits down to call Sandy and tell her to not come.
yeah, he's trying to dial, and he's so huge, he sits down in that like buoy chair thing that he has. But he's so
and he goes
huge.
to dial on the shell phone that his fingers are just hitting all the buttons.
Yeah, he can't dial. So he's like,
like, Patrick, you have to call
can you
her."
dial for me? And then Patrick dials. He's talking to Sandy. Sandy's like, hi, Patrick. He's like,
Yes,
I'm calling on behalf of my patient, SpongeBob. And he's like, you don't have to come over anymore. He's in my care now. And she's like, well, I'm coming over to take a look. And then she starts to go off on the same spiel she went on before of,
I'll be over there faster than a barefoot jackrabbit on a hot...
Oh, yeah, the rabbit. Don't bother, Sandy. Oh, SpongeBob, quick. Sandy's coming. We gotta make sure you're well, or she'll take you to the doctor.
yeah.
So-
And he's like, I got to fix you before she gets over here, basically. And he's like, okay, yeah. He's like spreading the sea nut butter on SpongeBob's feet, and then he like puts bread in, but he makes a sandwich out of SpongeBob's foot, and then
Do
puts
you
the
feel
shoe on it.
better?
And he's like, "Do you feel better?" And he's like, "Yeah." He does the old string on the tooth attached to the door and pulls one of SpongeBob's like front teeth out for no like. Why would you only do that when you have a loose tooth?
I did that as a kid.
I never did that,
I
but
had to try it.
I had one pulled at the dentist once. I remember them being like, oh, won't hurt at all. My mom was like, won't hurt at all. That shit hurt bad.
This shit hurted.
Oh, man.
So then the next scene, Patrick is like jumping up in the air, and he's in a singlet that's black, and he's like, are you fine now? And he's just like
Yeah, it's just
trampolining
bouncing
on
on him. Yeah, bouncing on him like he's a damn trambopoline. And he's just bouncing and bopping. And no, it's not really working. He's like, how about no? No. And then this is when we get to the Band-Aid gag, and he's got a Band-Aid on SpongeBob's back, and he's like, you feel better? And he's like, no. And then he rips it off and puts it back on a different way.
different way.
And he's like, no. And that goes on for a bit.
Yeah. Ow, now? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's when Sandy arrives, and she's like, SpongeBob, and he's like, oh, no, it's Sandy.
Right, but it's Patrick, and he has like a weird, almost like an executioner mask. There's like torches, and it's like weird satanic
They're doing
stuff.
like a ritual.
Yeah, like SpongeBob is tied to like this device. It looks like it's gonna
he's
keep
tied to some
stretching
weird
him out.
What's the word I'm looking for? Some weird, like, I don't know, like primitive torture type board.
Right.
Like it's made out of bamboo or something. It's made to be more primitive.
He's
yeah,
like,
and
"Oh,
SpongeBob,
just a minute,
yeah, Patrick has the mask on. It's hilarious.
But then we can see him rolling out SpongeBob out of the back. He's like in a giant circle now.
Yeah, he rolls him out the back door apparently.
Yeah.
And
right, Sandy says like, "Hey, where's SpongeBob?" And he goes, he's not here at the moment. Please leave a message after the beep." Beep. That was also one of my things for a while where I would say that on my phone.
It was a pretty memorable
Voicemail.
thing for sure.
Yeah.
And then she's like, okay, well, tell me, since when do you have 2 houses? And Patrick is like, well, I ran out of space. And she's like, yeah, since when does your house have feet? And there's just 2 houses. There's just like an identical house right next to his original house, but it's got feet coming out of it. And he's like, this is my mobile home, which is a hilarious line. Funnier than I think it gets credit for, because it's got feet, right? So it's mobile. And then at that point, SpongeBob sneezes, and the rock disguise wears off, and he's like, hi, Sandy. And that's when Patrick says, the dirt therapy seems to be working just fine.
Right, he's trying to cover up.
Right. Sandy says, he needs to see a real doctor. Patrick is like, nuh-uh, I'm taking care of him. Show her, SpongeBob. Say ah. And he says ah. This is like the first time we get that visual of the disgusting smelling breath coming out of someone. And it like goes down the street and like kills everything in its path and like leaves like a wasteland behind it.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, look, I'm good. And he just breathes and destroys the world around him. And Sandy's like, no.
Yeah, she's like, yeah, he's worse than I thought. And Patrick's like, he's fine. And he's like, I'm okay, really? SpongeBob says that. And then he sneezes again, getting bigger. And then she's like, I'm taking you to the doctor now. And then Patrick's like, no. And they're doing the tug of war with SpongeBob, trying to roll him back and forth.
Yeah.
They're like, no, the other way. Don't be silly. He's mine. And, she's like, you'll be better soon, SpongeBob. And they're doing all these different things. Like, she's rolling him this way, rolling him that way. And then she's, like standing on top of him to roll him. And then Patrick is using a wheelbarrow to roll him. And then Sandy is dribbling him like a basketball. And it's just funny because SpongeBob is just like completely helpless right now. He's just being pushed back and forth with no whatever. Yeah. Eventually he's like, guys, I'm good, really, and he sneezes, and so yeah, they're both pushing on him, and they pinch him, and he shoots up into the air, and then he's like rolling down towards the town, and then it shows him rolling towards the Krusty Krab. Patrick and Sandy are both blaming each other. And she says, you should be arrested for impersonating a doctor.
Yeah.
They're going down, and then, he's rolling down the hill towards the Krusty Krab. Mr. Krabs is cleaning some dimes, and SpongeBob is trying to warn him. Mr. Krabs out in front of the store. He's like, stop, SpongeBob, stop. Like he's afraid that he's going to destroy the store. And
right.
SpongeBob is coming, like barreling. And then
he
stops right at the
before.
last second, he just suddenly stops, like there's an invisible wall there.
And Krabs is like, oh, whew.
Oh, that was a close one, right?
Oh, man. Yeah.
And then right then, SpongeBob sneezes, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, as all the corks fly out of SpongeBob, and it's a huge explosion. All those bubbles built up inside of him now come barreling out, destroying the Krusty Krab.
Mm-hmm.
And we flash forward to the hospital.
Yeah, which is the sign is on an anchor that says hospital, so it's similar to Krabs' Get Up, but it's a big building.
And we get the second appearance of the purple Doctorfish, which
lucky boy.
Yeah, which is
Lucky Luck Boy.
Lucky Luck Boy. Which he's funny because last time we saw him, he had these weird skinny red arms that I pointed out.
Yeah.
This time he has regular purple arms. So
Of course.
he's
like
regular.
a regular purple armed person.
Yes. And
So he's basically reading to SpongeBob. And SpongeBob's
Yeah,
like,
he's
you're not
like-
going to make me read old magazines, are you? He's like, oh no, you get the sponge treatment.
yeah.
Which insists of SpongeBob getting dish soap poured on him.
Hans.
First, old Hans.
and then
Hans,
the real life, like,
it's like a hand.
hand.
Yeah, first it's just a 2D one image.
Right.
It comes and it grabs him and pulls him out. But then we can see that Hans is much more than that as well.
Yeah.
He takes SpongeBob, fills him with soap, dish soap, and he like gets him all soaped up.
Yeah, he soaps him up. Let's see. He starts to scrub a man's back in the shower,
Right, yeah.
which is Tom Kenny.
Is it? That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah,
Because
it's
he
like-
looks kind of like a hairy man.
Yeah, he's got a hairy back. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, and then next thing you know, he's rubbing a dude's feet.
And he's like, "Ooh, this tickles!" Like
Yeah.
he's enjoying it, you know. And when he's rubbing the feet, he goes, "I can smell again," which
Yeah.
is
it's
like a
because
joke on
the
smelly
are
feet. Right.
yeah, they're so smelly.
And then he's like washing a dish with him, and then he's washing the car, and then he's washing a floor with SpongeBob.
Woo! Yeah! Woo! Ah! This tickles.
I can smell again!
Woo! Yeah! Yeah! Woo! Yeah!
I feel as good as new. I love the doctor!
Here's your lollipop.
And woo,
Right?
yeah,
He's like,
yeah,
oh, yeah, I
woo.
feel good.
He's like, oh yeah, woo!
And
I
then-
love this,
And
man.
then Hans comes back. Here's your lollipop.
Yeah, and he
gives
hands
him-
him a huge lollipop.
And he's like, oh, nice.
Yeah, and he's like, and Patrick, seeing the lollipop, is like, so he wants a lollipop real bad. So he says, he blows a bubble. He pulls out a little, bubble out of his pocket, bubble solution and a bubble wound out of his pocket, and blows a bubble. And he's like, hey, Doc, I got the suds too. And then the doctor's like,
we have a very special treatment for you, Dr. Patrick.
Yeah, and he's like, he gets taken by Hans,
Yeah.
just like SpongeBob, and you're expecting the same kind of thing.
Right, first he's like lathering him up and
He lathers him
washing
up the same
and then
as
he's already
SpongeBob.
kind of like, oh, this is weird.
Yeah, and then he goes straight to the cactus, does
Yeah.
Patrick, and we see Hans, and it's great because it's live action, so it's like a weird, like, dried pink starfish being rubbed up against a literal cactus by a human hand. And then it takes him straight to the toilet, which I love. This is so good. This gag is so memorable, and it's so
Yeah.
good because the way that the shot cuts to the toilet, and then you see the hand with Patrick holding it, and it just slowly creeps towards the toilet before going in. It's just, I love how like slow it is for a
Yeah.
second. Like,
It's like, is he really going to put it
yeah,
in? And
it's like,
oh, he's
it's
in
like
there.
he's not gonna do it, is he?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh no, he did it. Like,
Yeah.
and
It's
he
like,
goes right in. And he's like, no, like, obviously, like, you don't want to be in the toilet. And it's funny because he didn't even clean the toilet with SpongeBob.
Right.
But he's going to put the
obviously
fucking
not, 'cause
starfish
they're-
in the toilet.
Yeah, they're giving him the bad treatment for trying to be a doctor.
Right.
And he's like, this doesn't seem right.
Right.
And then
Okay.
it ends.
That's funny. I never read it as they're punishing him.
Of course, yeah.
That's
That's why he's
funny.
like, oh, we have a special treatment for you. First of all, it's obvious he doesn't have
I feel
suds.
like an idiot.
He blows a bubble to, like, say that he has suds. He's like, oh, I got those suds too. And then he's like, oh, I heard about you being a doctor.
Somehow-
Here's what you get, you mother.
Somehow I never read it as that. I just read it as, like, I don't know. I guess I did and I didn't. I guess I did subconsciously read it that way. Because thinking about it now, it's like, why else would they do that? You know?
Yeah.
But it's funny. It like I never like consciously made that connection. That's funny.
Yeah.
But what a great episode that is.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny because I remember in the last episode when we were like, oh, next week we have Suds and Sleepy Time. And I was like, ooh, I don't know about these ones. I was
but
wrong. They're both
Suds
really
is
good.
A very unique disease. You know,
Absolutely.
it's a
Unique
memorable
to
thing.
sponges. But no, I mean, I really like the gags in the dreams that I had forgotten about. And then the live action gags are like my favorite in SpongeBob. And the one at the end of this with Patrick in the toilet is one of the most memorable that I can think
Yeah,
of.
as a live action.
Real,
starfish,
yeah,
it's funny.
like really just hilarious stuff. This was like, come to think of it, man, these are two episodes that I think probably really made me a fan of SpongeBob. Like when I was, because I've mentioned before that I wasn't immediately sold on it. So I think these are probably some of the few that I was like, okay, this show is actually pretty darn funny. Like they're really pushing the boundaries and being silly and doing stuff that other cartoons aren't doing, like this live action crap and what have you.
Yeah.
But
So this was episode 15.
yeah, 15.
It is now 3:37 at night.
We
We've been
took
recording
so
for 2.5
long.
hours.
What a good time.
We just need to get to the end.
It's going to be a lot of
Let's,
cut content, but
we'll just say, this next week, episode 16 is going to be Valentine's Day and the paper. The paper, very memorable. Valentine's Day, decently memorable.
it's
we will
funny.
talk about them.
The paper does not. I remember it, but I don't at the same time. Valentine's Day is more memorable to me now that just thinking about it now. But we'll see what happens after we watch them, because a lot of things get jogged as soon as you start watching the episode. You're like, oh, this one. Okay, yeah, I know every line to this one. I forgot.
So
it-
let's give it to him.
Yeah. Let's get what? Let's give what to him?
Give them the info
Oh,
on where to find you.
uh,
X gonna give it to you.
X gonna give it to you.
First we're gonna rock, then we're gonna roll.
It's Go Dog Go. My name's Alexander Beardsley. On the internet, I'm generally known as Ashton Waganda. That is spelled ASHTONWAGANDHA. Find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Twitch. I'm mostly active on Instagram, I would say, probably. So, follow me on there. Hit me up, message me, whatever you want to do. Also, follow our page on Facebook, Striped Sweater Productions. Look forward to more content from us outside of the Striped Sweater podcast in the near future. Also, send us some fan mail if you feel obliged at stripesweaterproductions@gmail.com. Zach?
I'm Zach Main. I am totally rad _Zach. I am mystified. You can also find us at stripesweaterproductions@gmail.com. Send us an email. Yeah, maybe we'll have our Patreon up So you can listen to the full version of this episode?
Yeah, this episode had like probably like an hour of like cut content. So hit us up. Check us out on Patreon. We don't have it fully set up yet, which is why we don't have the details yet. But we're going to have a couple different tiers. They will include things such as getting our episode 1 week in advance. And there will be incentive for the raw files as well. So you can hear the unedited goodness of Zach and I bantering about all kinds of random shit, which this episode we did a lot of. So look forward to that. If you like hearing us talk, hit us up on Patreon. We will let you know where to find us in the future. If not, just, Google Striped Sweater Productions Patreon. You'll probably find it.
I did want to mention, too, that recently I was on an episode of the Accidental Wrestling Fan podcast. I think it comes out on the same day this one does, too. But it was a lovely gentleman who invited me and Bubba and Chuck Stein on, and we
that's
talked
cool.
about wrestling and other shows, and I plugged this show too and kind of told them about it. They didn't get it because they're all old, but
Right.
it was cool. So look out for that if you want. Very interesting topics of discussion, and it was cool.
For sure, man. It sounds great.
But the one thing that we never talked about on that podcast was just what somebody would do with a drunken sailor. I should
That's
have asked
funny.
them.
Yeah, you should have.
It'd just be interesting to know.
Speaking of which, Zach Main, what would you do if David Spade was a sailor and you were on his boat and he was really hammered and he busted into wherever you were and was drunk as shit? It's like 5:30 a.m. What do you do?
And he just busted through.
Yeah, he busted
I would
through
give
the
him
door.
one classic line and hope it would work. I would just say, "What'd you do, Richard?"
I'm glad you said it, but no, you don't even have to say Richard because it's just, what'd you do?
It is, but I just figure
I know,
you gotta
yeah.
give him the Richard at the end.
That's one of my probably most quoted lines ever in life. I say that whenever anybody messes anything up, ever.
Yeah.
That is
What'd you
my
do?
go-to.
Classic.
And
for those
there's
at home,
there's literally probably only 20% of people who ever know what it's from. And I'm like, how do you not know this? This is
Great
like my
ass movie.
life.
I worked for that guy's cousin.
Callahan Auto Part? You work for them?
I work for Chris Farley's cousin, Jim Farley, at Ford.
Sure.
He looks just like him.
Really?
But we're not allowed to mention him because I don't know.
Yeah,
They're
I'm
very
sure it's like
different
some
people.
weird thing,
Very,
right?
very different.
Right.
We've even taught his son to do stuff in VR. But in the new Adam Sandler SNL, he writes a whole song about Chris Farley, and it's very touching.
Oh, that's not from SNL. That's from Adam Sandler's Netflix special.
No, he just wrote it on SNL and did like a live performance of it with like video and
Yeah, it's from his Netflix special from like months
he
ago.
performed it on SNL.
Okay, but it's from a long time ago.
Could be, but it's very touching and sad.
Yeah. No, it is. It absolutely is. You're not wrong about
So
that.
that
But I'm just
line
saying it's
obviously
not
is
a
from-
new thing.
The line was from Chris Farley, Tommy Boy. He backs up to try to get to the gas pump. The door like bends the opposite way. He puts it back. Richard, David Spade opens the door falls off. He asks him what he did. It's hilarious.
Yeah, he says,
that's it.
"What'd you do?" Because it's hilarious
do?
because he's the one who did it. But David Spade doesn't know that. And when
neither do you.
but no, you do know it. That's why it's funny. But
We do.
That's been the Striped Sweater Podcast, episode 15. We appreciate each and every one of you who has listened to us thus far. You guys are the best. Subscribe to us to get new episodes each and every Wednesday. That would be super great. Leave us a rating and a review on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. That would be super dope of you. Let all your SpongeBob-loving friends know about us because we are a couple of SpongeBob-loving men and we want to share the love. That's what this is all about. So, appreciate you.
Preach.
Until next time.
Peace.